Alex Skolnik, guitarist for Testament, the Alex Skolnik Trio, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Very, very wide array of styles and playing. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Alex.
Oh, thanks, Al. My pleasure. I understand we have the same first name.
Yes, so your mother had good taste.
Absolutely. I haven't been called Alexander since my grandmother.
Oh, wow. Every now and then I think of introducing myself as Xander, but I'm like, no, that's too far. I need to wear leather.
Yeah. It's a good name.
It's a good name.
Yeah, it reminds me of Tolstoy and.
Yeah, it has this kind of really powerful and elegant vibe. Anyway, here are the guitar players talking to each other about how great their names are.
Absolutely.
So, what have you been up to lately?
Oh boy, this has been a very busy, varied year for me. Let's see. Well, the project, probably most known for is Testament, and we're finishing up an album cycle, and this has included concerts, mostly international. We just got back from the Rock Hard Festival in Germany, where we headlined with some friends of ours, Tesla, who are actually always next to us in the music stores because alphabetically.
Oh, right, yeah.
And
Tesla.
And before that, we were in Australia doing the Soundwave Festival. There's a lot of bands on that. That was headlined by Guar. Sorry, not headlined by Guar. Guar was there. Dave Brocky was a friend of mine. It was his last shows, as it turned out. But glad I got to hang out with him a lot. But it was actually headlined by Green Day.
Oh, cool.
So normally Testament and Green Day wouldn't be on the same bill, but outside of the U.S., you have this variety that just doesn't happen otherwise.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, a month in Australia, a trip to Japan. We're starting to think about the next record, doing basic riffs. And then I've been busy with my trio, the Alex Skolnik Trio. We've released several albums. And we just did the Festival Guitar du Monde up in northern Quebec, which was this wonderful guitar festival that happens every year. And I am also in the midst of recording my first all-acoustic world music album. And that's called Planetary Coalition. And every song is like a trip to a different region. And I have special guests from all over the world. Some of them you've never heard of. Some of them sell out Royal Albert Hall. So it's really exciting. It's called Planetary Coalition, and the album's being done through Artist Share, and it comes out in October.
That's great. I read about that, and it sounded like a really, really cool idea. And it's way more than just a band. It's kind of a whole project. I found this one line that it was like world music, art, architecture, everything.
Right.
That's very cool. And people can get involved with that, right, Alex?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's a collective in a way, and it all starts with the music. But eventually, we hope to share more about each place. Being in a band, I get to travel around. I get to see a lot of these places. But I know that, for the majority of people, especially in the United States, and in more recent years, they don't get to travel that much. The cost has gone up. The economics have gone down, and this is a way to help, share the rest of the world as far as sounds. And once the music's done, we're planning to do videos that maybe tell a story about each region and where the musicians come from, and that will involve ecology, architecture, and everything. There's a great architect. I'm working with Maddie Samadar, and she's my girlfriend, and she's helping film videos for the project. And I think, yeah, it's a great thing. And also I get to play a lot of world acoustic guitar, which is an important side of my playing that I've never recorded before. And every year I say, okay, I have to do an album like this. It's finally got to the point, where it's okay, it's either now or never.
Yeah, I see. So is it like each track is a different part of the world?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's cool. So,
for example, I have a track from about India, and I have this great tabla player, Nitin Mitta, and he works with the jazz musician DJ Iyer, and also Kiran Ahluwalia. She's a great singer who's won 2 Canadian Juno Awards. There's another which is based on Argentina, and that's in 2 parts. And one part is a tango, and everybody knows the tango. I've got a great piano player, Dario Puente from Buenos Aires, playing on that. But then that morphs into what's called a chacarera, which is this rhythm from the rural regions of Argentina. So I've got these guys. They actually wrote into me. They're called the Raza Trunca, and they're an Argentinian folk band that does metal too. They love the metalheads, but that's awesome. They also, they're really great too, and their own music is great. But for my track, they played all this great indigenous percussion.
Wow, that sounds awesome, man. I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, and then there's a piece from inspired by Eastern Europe, and that has a guy from Macedonia, a guy from Albania, a guy from Greece. There's a song inspired by Turkey with a great Turkish player, and he plays this instrument called a kanun. Most people I know in the U.S., if I ask them what a kanun is, they have no idea.
Right.
That's understandable because we're not exposed to it, but it's actually this really exciting instrument. So it's kind of like a zither, or it sounds a little bit like a harp.
Oh, I see.
But it's played really fast. Guitar players will dig it.
Ah, I got you. Is that with a K or a C? K-A-N, right?
Yeah, K-A-N-U-N. Sometimes spelled with a Q. But I also just think the musical choices I'm making, I think many will relate to it because it's exciting. It has the excitement of heavy metal. It's just sonically very different. That is
very cool. I am excited for that. You've
lots
sold
of
me.
improvisation.
That's awesome, man.
Thank you. So that's it. I'm getting that. I'm going to be done with that next month, and then
in October, you said, right?
Yeah. Then I start writing metal riffs. I've started writing some riffs for Testament already, but the other guys are just getting started. So we let that process happen naturally, and then I'm also going to do another recording with my trio at some point, probably late in the year.
That's very cool. The Alex Skolnik Trio. It's interesting you said with the you described it as having like the spirit of heavy metal. I was going to ask you about, like later on about you have the Alex Skolnik Trio, which does these kind of jazzed out versions of metal tunes, and I was going to ask you why it doesn't work the other way if you do metalled out versions of jazz tunes. But I think you kind of alluded to it there. It's more in the spirit of it than the repertoire necessarily. So.
Well, yeah, I feel like maybe that could be done. Maybe I'm just not the guy to do it, but I feel like metalled out versions of jazz tunes would sound like a novelty. and the idea of what I do, jazz improvisation with some arrangements of metal tunes, that on paper that sounds like a novelty, but in reality it's anything but. I have articles from even very conservative jazz writers that have said as much.
That's very awesome.
I don't want to admit this, but I like this. It's very good.
I'm not supposed to like this because it's
no.
But it's very cool. Yeah. That's great. Alex, if we could switch. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I just with these projects, I feel like a curator a little, as much as a guitar player.
Yeah, you just kind of put all the pieces in order and.
Yeah, and also, I can tell people, please, listen to jazz. You'll like it. There are albums or pieces you'll really like. I could say the same thing about acoustic guitar pieces or world music, but those are all such broad categories, and there's so much music out there.
Yeah.
You'd have to go on the search, but by doing my own albums in these styles, I'm able to say, okay, here you go, guys. Yeah.
I have done all the legwork. Now you reap the benefits. Yeah.
So it captures what I like about that music, and I really think if rock fans give it a chance, they'll like it, and they'll be open to something really different.
Yeah. I was, since we're on the topic, I was going to ask you about the intersection of jazz and metal on every level. So like on a purely musical level, but also on a cultural level, and in terms of the audiences and the players.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so what,
I think they are as similar as they are different. Obviously, there are obvious differences, right? There are differences in the music, sonically, differences in the process. Often the fans look different haircuts, different wardrobe.
Right.
But there are similarities too, and I think in both cases, with jazz and heavy metal communities, they're both detached from the mainstream, and they're both very independent. They tend to not want to be dictated to by the media. The vast majority of the catalog that they listen to does not reach the mainstream, but there are these occasional exceptions. In the metal world, you have an occasional Metallica. In the jazz world, you have an occasional Herbie Hancock.
Right.
And these people, in both cases, they're part of the Grammys. They're part of the Hall of Fame. They're part of the music industry at that establishment level. But the vast majority of these categories are not, and I think that's something the fans take pride in, whether it's jazz or metal. Yeah,
I see. That's really interesting how they're kind of culturally pretty similar.
Absolutely, and I think there's less and less of a discrepancy over time.
Right. Yeah. Every now and then I hear some metal band do something that really just sounds so. It sounds like some Weird Out kind of Coltrane line or something, and it kind of makes my hair stand up, and I'm like, yes, that.
And more, you'll hear that. There's newer bands like Dillinger Escape Plan, for example.
Right. Yeah.
There's moments of their music, that reminds me of, it could be on a John Zorn album, for example. And then John Zorn, many people know him from it's the producer of Mr. Bungle, who was popular in the '90s with the singer from Faith No More, Mike Patton.
Mm.
But he's a very, very prolific improvisational artist who covers jazz, but many other styles.
Yeah.
And he's a Slayer fan as well.
That's awesome.
Cited Slayer as an influence, So, occasionally you have this overlap, and more you're meeting. I meet fans from one genre or the other that are, that have a foot in both. And then on the press side, you have guys like Ben Ratliff, who from the New York Times, who's he's written books on jazz, and he's chiefly a jazz critic, but he goes to metal shows, and I actually produced an EP a couple years ago for this band from Iraq that were refugees, Krasakauta, and Ben Ratliff came to the show and interviewed the guys, interviewed me, and he clearly knows about metal as well. And he interviewed Metallica for Times Talks, and definitely knew his subject matter.
That's great. I mean, it's so easy to, you always hear this like broken record of like lamenting the state of music, but it, like you said, more and more that kind of commingling thing. It's like, kind of headed in a really great direction at the same time. It seems like. So.
Yeah, I think
cool.
it's definitely a strange transitional time for music, I would say. There's definitely a disconnect with I think with mainstream culture. For example, I think the music that is heard on singing talent shows, for example,
right,
and sort of representative of what's music these days, and if you look at what's at the top, you look at the top 40, the majority sounds very similar.
Right.
And there's just this blurring of categories, and then so there's that going on. But at this, I think at the less mainstream level and the more human level, the passion for music is as great as ever. Right. And you go to places like these trade shows, like the NAMM show that happens every year. We all go there. They're packed. There's so much activity. You would never know that there's this sort of some crisis in the music industry.
Right. Yeah, people are just as fired up about it as ever. That's important to keep in mind. I like that.
Yeah, the passion has not waned at all.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like it ever will, so that's good.
Yeah, and I guess, there's some are threatened by EDM culture, and Saturday Night Live made a great skit about that, where Andy Samberg is the DJ, and everybody just worships the DJ.
I'll check that out.
And all he's doing is pushing buttons,
Right. More and more possibly different buttons.
And that exists, and that's popular to some, but I think people still love real instruments. People still love what can be done on a guitar, or on a drum set, or a piano, or a violin, whatever it is. I really think that'll always be there. It's just it's not as visible if you look at through a view of the mainstream and network television and stuff like that.
Totally. Alex, if we could totally switch gears here, I'm wondering about what your rig looks like these days. And, I mean, you play with so many different projects, so I guess you have a lot of stuff. Maybe you could start with what you're using for Testament and then kind of work through the Skolnik Trio and the Planetary Coalition.
Okay. People ask, how can you go back and forth between, these radically different genres? And I think gear does have a lot to do with it. So the gear I use for Testament, I would not use for the other project.
Yeah.
And it's a very specific type of gear. So, it is the standard configuration of a head and two cabinets, designed to play large venues, very loud, and play with a drum kit. So, and a solid body guitar. So I'll start with the amp. The amp is made by Buddha, which was its own company and is now a division of Peavey. They did a great job of just capturing what I want in an amp. So it's a 3-channel amp. It has a clean channel, what I think of as a classic rock channel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is sort of semi-overdriven, maybe in the style of 70s and early 80s Marshalls. And then a high gain channel. And that's sort of the post Eddie Van Halen, post Randy Rhoads, post James Hetfield channel. Yeah, you can get those sounds from it.
Yeah.
And it has a foot switch. It has independent effects loops, and it also has tube and solid state capabilities.
Oh, that's cool.
So it doesn't. Yeah, it's not.
Is it a hybrid, or you could just run it in either?
It's a hybrid.
Oh, okay. I see.
But you can choose how much you could have just a tube sound. You could have just a solid state sound.
That's great, especially if you blow a tube on a gig or something.
So that's the thing, and this way there isn't as much stress on the tubes. I've never had a problem with solid state. I had a solid state amp before I had this amp, and there are a lot of great solid state amps. It's just people are surprised when they hear that. There's just for some reason there's a stigma, but this way with this amplifier you have a choice. So it's called the AS Preceptor by Buddha.
Preceptor, and is that inspired by any amps that you've owned in the past that you were really pumped about, or is that kind of like a ground up kind of thing?
Yeah, well, the solid state amp that I was referring to is called the Mode 4, and it was made by Marshall. And it was interesting. While they were making them, there was a small group of guys that swore by them. Right? John Five, I think it was one of them.
Oh yeah,
I was one of them. There's a couple others, and we've had this conversation, but we just couldn't understand why they would stop making. And I guess it just didn't catch on, which, that is understandable. But I felt like that really set a template for what I wanted in an amp. Although there were some changes I would have made that, with this amp, the changes are there, and it's tweaked a bit, and it has a little bit of influence from other amps as well. But I would say, that was a key right there.
I see. Cool. And so what about what guitar are you using these days? You have your signature ESP now, right?
Yeah, the signature ESP, which just came out really well. After the early '90s, when I'd been an Ibanez guy, and I still like Ibanez's, but I think part of what happened was as I expanded musically, I felt more of a kinship with the original classic guitars I played.
I see.
And my first guitar had been a Les Paul. And the Les Paul, I think it's one of the best sounding guitars there is. Especially when you have a good one. They sound different. There are good years and bad years with the company. just different levels. There's entry level ones. There's high end historical edition custom shop ones. But when a Les Paul sounds good, I think it's some of the best tone. And playing wise, they can be a little bit rougher than the sort of the Ibanez's or Charvels that were designed for
just with the feel.
Really,
you mean?
Yeah, so in that the whole mid '80s period where you had guys after Van Halen and Rhodes had come out, Randy Rhodes had popularized Jackson. Van Halen's original guitar neck was a Charvel. So those guitars, had a big influence, especially for fast players. So anyway, with the ESP, what I wanted to do was have a guitar that had that great classic Les Paul tone, but with a little more ease of use.
Yeah, I see.
So
faster feel. Yeah,
I've had people that are more of the Jackson Charvel types play it, and they say they're much more comfortable on it than a typical Les Paul.
That's great. What size strings do you put on it?
I actually put 12s on it.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, but the reason for that, when I get into describing my jazz rig, I'll explain more about it. But that really comes from playing jazz improvisation on a hollow body. I think I got really used to heavier strings.
Right.
And
okay,
I think the sound is good. It cuts through a little better. I use D'Addario, and they've actually started this new line called the NYXL, which is a great line of strings, and they are they cut through really well. And I think in the case of, from my experience at least, a band like Testament plays very loud in rehearsal and on stage, and you need earplugs. Even if one instrument is playing, even if just the bass is playing, you need earplugs that loud.
Nice.
So I not only need a guitar and amp that are built like a tank, but having those thick strings just helps cut through even more. Yeah,
it really beefs up the sound, kind of. That's cool.
Yeah, and these days we mostly play tuned down a half step.
Oh, so it probably helps for that too.
Yeah, so it's not as hard to bend as if you're in standard tuning. Although I use it for other projects with standard tuning as well, and I just got used to it.
Right. That's cool. So what about your jazz rig?
All right, so the jazz rig, the amp is also a Buddha, but it's the one I've been using lately is called a Baby Buddha.
Baby Buddha.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool that you can use the same company for both.
Yeah, it's worked out really well. Now they built me a combo amp that was sort of a custom combo, which I love the sound of, and I've done a bunch of recording with it, but it's very heavy, and I needed an amp for taking around New York.
Right.
Like one example, I did a gig last month with the bass player Stu Ham. He was playing at the Iridium, and I want to have a sound I'm used to for a gig like that. And this Baby Buddha, I can, it's very easy to throw in a cab or subway. So it only has very basic tone controls. It has it's treble and bass. That's it.
Nice.
Yeah. I make up for that though with some of the pedals.
Even in the jazz.
So for the jazz thing. I have a pedal board, and I've been using a pedal called the Distillery, and that's made by Tone Concepts, which is a pretty new company based in Toronto. And that gives that's a little bit like an equalizer and a preamp in one. And that gives me, it makes the amp sound, it takes the existing sound of the amp, tightens it up, makes it better, but also gives me the extra tone controls I need.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then I have some other pedals that I use. I've been using this pedal called a delayed llama.
Delayed llama.
Which is made by Jam Pedals, which is actually a Greek company. And they make a good distortion unit too that I use also with in the so some of these I find their way into the Testament rig as well.
Yeah, I see.
But I also like Buddha makes a delay pedal that I really like as well. So I've been using that. And then as far as guitars, for a long time I was using a hollow body built by Heritage, but those guitars don't get built very often. And
yeah, I
Heritage
didn't even realize they get built at all anymore. That's cool.
Yeah, no, they make them. They're like these rare gems that are hard to get.
I see.
They made me a signature solid body guitar too, which was it was a big honor, but it was so hard for people to get. And I need backups because especially for my solid bodies, these guitars take abuse on tour. They get knocked over in windstorms and mishandled by airlines. So you need a product that you don't want bad things to happen to it, but you can replace it if that does happen. So more recently I've been playing Godin guitars for the trio, and I need jazz improvisation. And mostly I've been using what's called the Fifth Avenue guitar.
Oh, right, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, but they came out with a new one this year, the Montreal Premiere. I've never been a big user of thin semi-hollow bodies, such as the Gibson 335, for example.
Yeah.
Template. I like the sound of them. A lot of great players use them. B.B. King, to John Scofield, they all use that style of guitar. But I never really understood the point of it because it's it's like, well, it feels like an electric, but it sounds like a hollow body. Why not just play a hollow body? This guitar to me just won me over right away. Somehow it has just the right feel. Just the right combination of solid body and hollow body characteristics. Yeah,
that's very cool. What did you say the name of it was?
It's the Montreal Premiere.
Oh, okay. That's cool. I'll have to check that out.
They have a couple different Montreal versions, but this is the latest one.
I see. Awesome. All right. And with the Planetary Coalition, I won't make you totally go into all the stuff because it sounds like you're probably...
Okay, well, that's a lot simpler, actually.
It's simpler. I was assuming, all these projects you're probably using even more. But, okay, so what do you use for that?
Well, for an acoustic... Well, when we play live, we've done a few shows now. When we play live, I use a Trace acoustic amp, which is really... Yeah, it's really convenient. And guitar-wise, for nylon stuff, I've been using this Yamaha NX series.
Okay.
The nylon guitar.
Cool. Do you play that with a pick, or do you have some fingerstyle stuff as well?
There's some a little bit of hybrid finger and pick, but mostly with a pick.
Mostly with the pick, yeah.
And I've started using different picks too.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, pretty simple way to get a different sound.
Well, my friend Brian Kehoe over at Dunlop sent me a bunch of picks just to try out. And I never thought, picks would make that much of a difference. And I've used very small picks for the longest time. Jazz 3s. People think I'm nuts. But he sent these ones that I feel like they're called Ultex.
Ultex. Oh yeah, I've come across those actually.
Yeah, somehow for acoustic playing, it works out really, really well. And then for the nylon guitar stuff, it's the NCX by Yamaha. For steel, live, I was using the guitar called the LJX, also by Yamaha. But I also rediscovered an old Martin I had laying around.
Oh, wow. That sounds like it could be a treat.
Yeah. And it has a cutaway. And it's I think it's the it's definitely it's 16 is the number on it.
16, I see.
And in the studio, it just sounds fabulous. So I don't take it around as much. JC16, it's called.
JC16. So that's in the studio on the new Planetary.
Yes.
The first.
Yeah.
Planetary Coalition. That's awesome. Hey, Alex, I have two more questions for you before I let you go. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I know you're
it's my pleasure. Absolutely.
A very busy guy. You mentioned the Dillinger Escape Plan. I'm wondering who else the avid metal and jazz fan should be listening to.
Well, definitely John Zorn is who I mentioned before.
John Zorn.
Yeah. Now, John Zorn has many projects.
Yeah, he's done a ton of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the most prolific artists I can think of. So I think metal fans would appreciate his projects. Naked City, and that has Bill Frisell on guitar. But there's
nice.
All out. Bill Frisell, very different than on his own albums.
Yeah, I don't think metal when I think Bill Frisell, but
no, but believe me, there's moments where you'd be surprised.
Nice.
And also he's got some stuff with Dave Lombardo and Mike Patton.
Okay.
So I think I don't want to give the wrong names of the projects because I can't keep them straight. But I think if you Google John Zorn, Mike Patton,
you'll find it.
Come up with a lot of stuff, and I think a couple of those include Dave Lombardo as well.
Awesome.
And then of course, there are these groups like Meshuggah, was a very heavy band. But they're also very musically interesting and very mathematical in their rhythms.
Yeah, I heard trumpet player Dave Douglas talking about them.
There's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys like Dave Douglas are into them. And at one point I heard that Steve Coleman was trying to figure out one of their rhythms. And Steve, Coleman is this rhythm master on this jazz saxophonist. But so I think that's another really good example. Check out.
Awesome, that's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, I've definitely dipped into the Meshuggah, but I haven't listen to that much John Zorn, so I'm gonna hunt that down.
Oh yeah, it's great.
That's awesome.
Well, definitely, yeah, and definitely check out the Naked City stuff.
Naked City.
My personal favorite. It's not. Yeah, it wouldn't be for metalheads, but musically, he has this whole series called Book of Angels, which a lot of it. But yeah, Pat Metheny actually, his most recent one in the series. I think that there's like a couple dozen, but the most recent one is with Pat Metheny.
I see.
So I love all that music. He doesn't play on all of it. He writes. There's a lot of albums where he writes for other instruments. The film works too are great as well.
Film works, yeah. Alex, we've been asking everyone we interview this last question here. What is music?
Well, obviously that could be a lecture.
Yeah.
That really should be a 90-minute lecture.
A 90-minute lecture. And could you boil it down for 1 minute or less? 2 minutes?
Yeah, a 90-minute lecture that happens every day for.
Right. Yeah, the rest of time.
Yeah, or at least for a semester. I guess I'll just keep it very simple. One word: expression.
All right. I like that. We've gotten we got the universal language a couple times. Someone just laughed and said, "What isn't music?" We've been getting some great responses, but we haven't gotten just expression yet. So
yeah,
definitely dig that.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of trying to give a thought out, detailed, meaningful answer,
yeah, you're never going to get it.
Not going to happen. Let's just play it safe.
Yeah, something really beautiful about that. It's like the most fundamental question of the whole reason why we're a store and why you're in all these bands is impossible to do. Impossible to say. So that's kind of worth remembering.
Definitely.
Well, hey man, I really dig your playing, Alex, and I was kind of digging into it some more, before I spoke with you, and I like your playing, but it's also the diversity and the openness of your playing, I think, is really inspiring to a lot of players, and it's great to see, people like you who are in such ostensibly different worlds, just kind of doing everything. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, also, I want to also mention I write a lot about it. Actually, I put out a book last year that's called Geeks to Guitar Hero. Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and I just talk a lot about the process of being diverse and whatnot. And the whole, everybody's musical journey is different, but I talk a lot about mine and share some anecdotes, and it's probably going to be re-released at some point. So I recommend people, get this version if they're interested, and it's on Amazon or geekstoguitarhero.com or my own website, alexskolnik.com.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Definitely something worth checking out.
Great.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks a lot for speaking with us today.
Okay, Al.
And we'll see you down the line, maybe.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, Al.